All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 108. It is Tuesday night, and we like to hear from you. My name is Bob Ekhayri. We're going to be joined by my regular co host, JD Moore. And let's see, we're ready to hear from you. So if you want to talk about what's going on in college football, obviously there's a lot going on with the latest CFP rankings. We've got action going on right now. There's a lot to talk about. So we want to hear from you. If you'd like to join the conversation, just go ahead and hit request. JD, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Happy Tuesday night to you all. We've obviously got the newest batch of rankings in. And finally, we've got some undefeated teams up at the very top. The top four teams, the last remaining undefeated teams in the country. I don't think I have any qualms on it tonight. Very weirdly enough. Very pleased to see this result. And, I'm sure we'll have a couple of callers who will be very happy to talk about that as well. But no, so far so good on this Tuesday evening.
Yeah, I think the biggest controversy so far has been UCLA and whether or not they're ranked too low for their current. I mean, because right now it's easy to compare USC and UCLA. They both have one loss in the Pac-12. They both have played Utah, and that's been something that's been an issue because obviously UCLA. Oh, actually, I see we have a couple of callers, so we'll go ahead and let people up. But I mean, that I know has been one of the things, and our own Dan Frijoles was on the call and actually got in a question that's gotten some attention on Twitter because he's the one who asked about the difference between those two teams. And Boo Corrigan basically said the 1-point loss by USC at Utah, going for two, and the emotion of that game was something that they took into account. But hey, we've got someone up here. We'd love to hear from you, JCR1216. We go through everyone as we can, so be patient. We'll try to get to everyone. But yeah, feel free to unmute. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, hello there. How's your day going though?
Good. How's yours?
That's going well. I saw that my Tar Heels were ranked in the top 15.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and they 15's not bad. It's within, we talked a little bit about North Carolina before, and it's kind of one of those interesting teams where if they win completely out, I think some things would have to break their way, but it's not totally outside the realm of possibility. It's a little disappointing to see them ranked so low for a one-loss team, but at least they're ranked. What do you think, JD?
It's definitely interesting, and I think one weird thing that nobody really knows what to do with North Carolina really has to stem with the fact of we haven't seen a true consistency of what this North Carolina team is. We have a lot of close wins, and then of course their one loss is the blowout loss to Notre Dame, which I think for a long time had been long affected of they lost to Notre Dame, who also lost to Marshall, who also lost to Stanford, who got blown out by Ohio State, and it really kind of brought down that national perception of North Carolina for quite a while. But, I mean, just as Bobek said, I think right now they're going to need a lot of help. I think they'll still be behind. Even if they win out, they'll be behind a Pac-12 champion because you've got USC, UCLA, and Oregon all looking great. Right now in the Big 12, kind of that's TCU's show right now, so you need some help there. And given that Tennessee is still hanging around at number 5, I could see a world where North Carolina could go with a one loss on the season and then gets pushed out by Tennessee by the end of the season. But again, when it comes down to North Carolina, I think it's just a lot of people don't know what to make of them. I mean, this is the team that had both teams scoring more than 60 and barely hung on to beat App State at the start of the season. One score game against Georgia State, one score game against Miami, who has turned out to be a dreadful Miami this year, one score game against Virginia, one score game against Duke. And then you obviously have the loss to Notre Dame where you're losing by double digits on that one. So we'll see what they look like, especially at the end of the season when they've got North Carolina State, which, the Wolfpack looks really stout right now. Georgia Tech is starting to get pesky, wildly enough, with this interim coach. And then next week, or actually this Saturday, they've got that competition against Wake Forest, which should settle a couple of things. But yeah, I mean, if this is a team that runs the table, I think they're going to need some kind of help if they want to get in the playoff. But I think right now, if you want to get that ACC spot for a New Year's Six game, I think North Carolina is looking pretty dang good for that.
I mean, I am open to selling my soul to get UNC into the college football playoff. But Drake May's still young.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what JD touched on is, I think, the story with UNC this season is just they play to the level of their competition consistently. There's only a couple of games this year where they haven't done that. So I think that's kind of the real tricky part with it is when you fly that close to the sun, and you're not putting teams away and not blowing out more or less bad teams, then it always kind of feels like, this is all going to come apart at some point during the season. So I think that's probably why a lot of voters, why the committee's a little leery on them still right now, and they're not quite getting as much respect as you would expect for an 8-1 team. But it's just kind of the position that they're in. If they win out, then that kind of settles your questions, and then it's just a matter of what everybody else does.
Yeah. Especially with a team like UNC. I've seen them play a lot this year. Their biggest problem is that defense led by Gene Chisnick. They've had some bright moments this year, but I don't like going to every single game with a heart attack, especially that Virginia game last week. I legitimately thought, since, Virginia's always had our number, I'm scared about that Tech game. That Tech game is going to be like I hate Georgia Tech. Ugh. But Clemson looks beatable. Clemson looks beatable, which I was scared about because my birthday is near the ACC championship, and I live in North Carolina, so I might be able to go to that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, this has also been another weird year where we've had Clemson look, somewhat mortal. This isn't the national championship buzzkill that has been dominating the ACC for so long. This is a team that, once again, that offense looks very, very not the superstar lineup that you had typically expected to see. DJ has been benched a couple of times in games because they couldn't get anything started in this Notre Dame game. They took so long to just even get on the scoreboard. It was just absolutely incredible to see how incompetent that offense was, and especially with a team like North Carolina. I mean, Gene Chizik, for all of his faults as a defensive coordinator, he's really helped out by this offense that is consistently putting up points. I mean, they've had only one game this season where they did not score at least 31 points. Several of their games have been 40-point games, 50-point games, even the 60-point game that you had against Appalachian State.
My mom was at App State.
Oh, really?
Sorry, yeah, she kept joking about that game against UNC where App beat UNC in Chapel Hill. So I had multiple heart attacks during that App State game.
Hey, listen, I know that you are not alone, especially with how firepower that was and the absolute bananas hystericalness that happened in the fourth quarter. And then for App State to lose so closely in that game was an absolutely incredible game that happened early in this season. But, JCR 1216, really appreciate the call and the opportunity to talk about the Carolina Tar Heels for a moment.
Well, thank you for having me on. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and go Heels.
Absolutely. Good luck this weekend for the Heels. Hey, John, it's good to see you again. How you doing,
Good.
man?
Hey, sorry for falling asleep last time. That's my bad. Hey, so my question is, really was relating to someone definitely on the hot seat of coaching. Nick Saban. Now it's a joke, but so as you guys probably saw over the weekend, Nick. Alabama lost for the second time during the regular season, which is a cardinal sin in the state of Alabama, apparently. And of course, the typical narrative, I think, comes up every single time when the very rare occurrence that they have two losses. So is this it for Nick Saban? Does Nick Saban need to go? Is this the bottom half of Alabama football, which I roll my eyes at every single time the conversation occurs. But on a fair point, Nick Saban is also in a coach in his 70s that's pretty much checked every single box. I think a coach really needs to hit at this point in his career. So I guess my question to you guys is are we hitting a point that we now have to really have a serious look at how many years we have left with Nick Saban?
I think it's always fair to ask how many more years we're going to get of some of these older coaches, and really the question is how the end of their career is going to finish up, because we've seen some coaches that try to hang on for too long. Not many of them are able to pull a Bob Stoops and, ride out at pretty much the height of what they're doing. But I think the big question with Nick Saban is that he's proven that he can manage a high-level program like this. We know that. That's not in question. I think the big question is the fact that he's had this revolving door of assistants and coordinators for years because of that success. And a lot of people are really unhappy with Bill O'Brien right now. And if he comes back another year, because I think if you watch the games, it's really easy to say Bryce Young deserves a better team. As outlandish as that sounds, at the surface, when you're talking about Alabama and what they traditionally put on the field. But this team especially, they aren't the characteristic Alabama team. They're sloppy, they're undisciplined, you're not getting the consistent play that you expect. And really, Bryce Young is having to dig them out of a lot of holes. And sometimes he's not given the chance, or his players aren't able to make the plays that they need for what he can do to actually show through. So I think that's the biggest question facing Alabama is what is he going to do with his staff? Is he going to make the changes that are necessary, that it looks like are necessary from an outsider's perspective? And what is this Alabama staff going to look like in 2023? Because it doesn't seem like Saban's ready to retire, and he doesn't seem like the kind of person who's ready for this to be his last season if he quits voluntarily, if he retires on his own conditions. So what changes will he make next year? And will that fix things, or is there more of an underlying issue? Because we have seen some great coaches who lost their touch at the end. A lot of people talk about Philip Fulmer got a raw deal at Tennessee. Philip Fulmer had kind of gotten lazy on the recruiting trail. Was letting really high, talented recruits in their backyard get away from them, and then he lost some games that he never should have lost. And a lot of it came back to who his coordinators were they able to keep him afloat, and when they left, it all fell apart. So it'll be interesting to see the changes that he makes for next season, and just as much if he chooses to keep some of these staff members on, despite some pretty glaring deficiencies.
I'm just going to say, I admit I'm a little hesitant to write off Nick Saban just for one season like this. I think I'd give him quite a bit more, leeway, because there's so much that goes on. He's got basically an NFL factory, and he loses players. And granted, he reloads really well, but we've seen how he'll tweak things, and the team will come back. So every once in a while, I could see with Alabama the way they are now. Gosh, I mean, would I take them? I mean, it seems like at this point they're, with Ole Miss, Austin Peay, and Auburn, I expect them to have a strong chance to win out. I mean, Ole Miss could beat them. It's certainly possible, and I'm sure Lane Kiffin would like a lot, nothing better than to do that. But I think a 2-loss season or even a 3-loss season once in a while for Alabama is not that, in my mind, is not Nick Saban losing his touch, at least not for me. I'm not quite willing to reach that point. I know, for example, the last coach that was seeming to be, I don't know, dynastic was probably, Pete Carroll. I mean, don't get me wrong, Dabo, of course, as well, but he's still active on the college level. But with Carroll, too, I remember everyone wanted to keep writing it off when they'd have a bad season. Then the next season they'd come in and do quite well and finish pretty high in the pre-playoff era. So sometimes with these guys, it's like they're not going to be perfect every year because it is the transition of college and the constant churn. But someone like Saban, he pulls in talent. John Talty, I still love that book he wrote in explaining what his secret was in terms of building on, class after class. His entire focus is recruiting first and coaching second. JD, I know you wanted something to add to this.
Yeah, I think one of the other curious things that, anytime we hear is the Bama dynasty dead, or does Nick Saban need to hang it up? There's always the interesting thing of, this is a very, very rare time for Nick Saban to ever get blown out in a game or to look like he isn't in control. And you got to remember, this is, yes, a 2-loss season, but right now the 2 losses are to 2 top 10 teams by a grand total of 4 points. And we've got people who are saying, hey, is it time for the greatest coach of all time to hang it up because, we're now in November and Alabama might be out of the playoff race? I mean, that's one of the things that's always been crazy to me about Nick Saban is, no no other coach is going to step up in this place and perform at the level, not just the way that he has, but the way that he continues to have. Like, Alabama's a top 10 team right now, and people are saying, well, guess Alabama's all done. Do you know how many teams would absolutely fall head over heels and just absolutely slaughter themselves to try to make sure that they could be in the top 10 in any playoff ranking, let alone when Alabama drops down to the bottom of the top 10 and people are saying, hey, is it time to change the regime? I think right now there are very few Alabama fans who realistically look at this, and especially when you consider the out of state tuition that now comes to the University of Alabama, the amount of capital improvements that have happened because of Nick Saban and football. I can't imagine that this is going to be a world that, Alabama is going to try to push Nick Saban out the door, especially given, again, 2 losses this season to 2 top 10 teams by a grand total of 4 points. And again, both are on the road. I think this is definitely, a quote unquote down year for Alabama. But man, what a foundation to have a quote unquote down year when your bad season is, you know what? We lost to 2 top 10 teams by 4 points, and we're probably going to go to the Citrus Bowl, maybe an outside shot at a New Year's Six game.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying that I think that Nick Saban is done by any means. I will say that the way they've lost these games bring up some really interesting questions about this program and how it's being managed, because Bama's lost to really great teams before, and they've lost on fluke plays before. But right now, currently, they are dead last in FBS. 128th is what they're tied for when it comes to penalties per game, and they're 124th in penalty yards per game. You go back to the Tennessee game, yeah, they lost by 3 points. They also had 130 yards worth of penalties. Against LSU, they had almost 100 yards of penalties. That's what's got me raising some questions here, because the discipline level that you expect, and I mean, the jokes were being made after the Tennessee loss, that it was an undisciplined team. They were racking up penalties. Saban was going to chew them out. There were going to be guys running until they puked, and they'd learned their lesson, and they haven't. The offensive line quality is so much lower this year compared to past years, and I think that that's really, for me, what sets this question about Saban and what he's doing and what his staff are doing apart from in past years where they've gotten a loss that was kind of unexpected or something like that, whereas this seems like there's more of a systemic issue going on that it's going to take some staff turnover to fix, because whatever they're doing right now, it's not working because they haven't fixed this problem that is glaringly obvious all season long. And yeah, LSU and Tennessee are top 10 right now. If they'd lost to Alabama instead of won, they probably wouldn't be. Tennessee might, but LSU would not. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at in terms of, is this Alabama season different? Does it raise different questions for Alabama? I'm not saying they have a Nick Saban problem. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but things need to be changed. And if they don't, then that's going to raise some questions next year when you're going to have player turnover, and it's going to be a lot more uncertain.
Yeah, and I mean, I just thank you all for your answers. I think the last point I wanted to make is I know that there's questions of Nick Saban, but I imagine there's 128 other teams I'd love to have Nick Saban as their coach instead of what they have right now for them. But thanks, you guys.
Thank you, man. Hey, Dave, you've been really patient. What's up?
I'm having some fun today because I just hopped out of a space talking about some of the coaching opportunities, the coaching options for University of South Florida. And one name that was brought up is the current coach for Florida A&M, Coach Willie Simmons, and I want to hear your thoughts about that. Considering the type of challenges that historically Black colleges and universities, and let me be clear, I'm an historically Black college and university alum. I went to North Carolina A&T State University. So with the opportunity, with the fact that his name is being brought up as an option to be the head coach of the University of South Florida, I wanted to hear your thoughts.
That sounds like an attractive hire, only because I agree. I think for a school like South Florida, they're not going to be competing with some of these other programs on the market right now. And as you pointed out, there is just some incredible talent right now in HBCU football. Sure, yeah, everyone's looking at Dion, and he's earned it. I mean, I can't I can't say he hasn't, but you're right. I mean, because you're talking about Connell Maynard, right?
No, Willie Simmons. Willie Simmons. He's the head coach of Florida A&M.
Oh, Florida A&M.
Florida.
Oh my God, I was thinking of Alabama A&M because they're not
Nah,
doing. Yeah, because I was
Maynard.
like, oh no. Okay.
Nah. A&T's coach is Sam Watson. Maynard did go to North Carolina A&T, but A&T's we're talking about Willie Simmons for Florida
Oh
A&M.
man, that's a really good point. Because first of all, you're right. I think Willie Simmons definitely fits been better, only because he knows the recruiting, he knows what to do there, and he's been just a solid winner there for consistently since before the pandemic. He got them built up. Obviously, the pandemic kind of knocked everyone down there for a season, but it came right back. And I mean, I remember last season; that was a hell of a season. Going all the way to the first round of the playoffs, which is kind of one of those funny things when you don't get into the Celebration Bowl, you actually get a chance to play in the playoffs as an HBCU, as we saw with North Carolina A&T that one year, as well as Florida A&M before North Carolina A&T moved out of the MEAC. So I think that would be an interesting call. I've always been fascinated why Florida A&M. They had some folks may remember that kind of abortive move up to FBS that was really half-baked. They didn't do a good job, I think, of planning it out. But especially in this environment where you got conferences, I think, like, especially Conference USA and a few others that would love to add an extra team, I'm surprised Rattlers haven't been tempted to move up again. I mean, maybe they just got, not to put too much of a pun on it, snake bit by that last time. But if they don't, I don't think there's any reason why someone like Willie Simmons wouldn't be attractive at USF, because he knows the area. He can win at a program that isn't, demand. Because I always wonder, was that part of the problem with Charlie Strong and Willie Taggart? Although Willie Taggart did fine enough. I mean, he didn't really stick around there to do much. But with Charlie Strong, clearly that didn't work out well for them. And I wonder if that's although he had been successful at Louisville before he went over to Texas. I don't know, JD, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things, for Coach Simmons is he went to Florida A&M at a time that they were at a really, really, really difficult time for the program. Gets in 2017. They've been really struggling. They even went through their own conference transition when they went ahead and they ended up joining, the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And, they took off that first season and they went 9-3. And now overall, Coach Simmons is 51-23, and last year he's getting Florida A&M into the top 25 of the FCS rankings. And he's got a massive win streak that's happening right now in Tallahassee as well. The 14 games that he's won up there, it continues to show a lot of really strong life. He's been able to make a lot of lemonade out of lemons, and he's one of those guys of, if you want to take a guy that can help develop players to get into the NFL, I mean, you got Marquez Bell, who, he was the first guy in, I think, almost about a decade to get from Florida A&M to an NFL roster. And that's a kind of guy that USF really needs right now. Somebody who not just knows the area, but knows how to dig up a program and make it succeed and build a really strong, successful foundation under it. Like one of the big things that everybody had with, you had Charlie Strong there who had fallen out of Texas and kind of done the cash out when he goes and tries to take that opportunity at USF. They kind of falter off, especially after that 7-game win streak to start. But then they bring in Jeff Scott, who, he's this lauded coordinator from Clemson. He comes down and he only goes 4-26, and he has only one win against FBS competition. USF is in a very, very bad spot right now, and they need to get creative for whoever this next hire is going to be. Now, I love what Coach Simmons has done for HBCU football. I love what he's done for the Rattlers at Florida A&M. But if he wants to take the jump up to the next step and USF is willing to talk, I think he might be a fantastic out-of-the-box candidate for USF. Now, plenty of other people have been speculating on a couple of other opportunities. I've seen a lot of names come up from the MAC. Like I know Sean Lewis has been thrown out there. We've seen Jason Candle floated out there. Some people have decided, maybe we try the retread one more time where they want to consider someone like a Dan Mullen. I don't think that's necessarily a great idea. But if we're going to look for someone else, Dave, I firmly agree. I think this is going to be a great opportunity if Willie Simmons wants to jump up to the next level. But as Bobak said, I think he's building something incredible at Florida A&M. And if he really wants to elevate this brand of football. I think he's been a fantastic hire at Florida A&M, and I'd love to see him continue to raise up the Rattlers.
Let's
Yeah,
just say that the alumni base. I was just in a group with a bunch of USF alums and a lot of fans, and like a lot of them, some are in, a lot of them are pretty much. Their thoughts are that Willie Simmons is number one on the list, and if Willie Simmons is number one on the list, and the AD feels that same way, this could be a done deal by December. Because right now, it doesn't look like Florida A&M is going to make the FCF playoffs due to strength of schedule, because they don't have that many. They don't have like a big quality win outside of conference. So, and they're not going to be able to make the SWAC championship or the Celebration Bowl this year because they lost to Jackson State. So their season will be done in 2 weeks. It's looking like, unless FCS goes wacky and they sneak in and get an at-large bid like they did last year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think it's tough, especially because Jackson State just looks like on another level this year, and yeah, Alabama State, Bethune Cookman, not sure that's going to be. I have a question for you, Dave, because with USF, because I think part of it too is they're trying to get that on-campus stadium, and I wonder if pulling someone. That's the only thing. I wonder what kind of coach they're hoping to get to sort of build that momentum, because they're being very deliberate in their process. Like, they'll make an announcement, they'll go back, they'll do all the work, they'll say, hey, we're thinking about a stadium, we're going to do whatever, I forgot how they call it, but that initial concept review. Then they'll come back and say, we passed the concept review, now we're going to do a site review. They come back and say, we've picked a site, now we're going to do this. So that stadium is quietly moving forward in the background. I haven't heard anything that's made it sound like it's not going to happen eventually. And I mean, it could. There's a million reasons things can get derailed, but they definitely need a coach who can get there and start to build that foundation. And yeah, it sounds like he would be definitely a strong candidate. That's a good one. Well, Dave, I really appreciate that. By the way, I have a question. So what are your thoughts on, FAMU and Bethune Cookman joining the SWAC? Do you think they've been a good fit?
Oh, well, I mean, they have some historical rivalries there. And at the time with the MEAC, a few years back when the MEAC was trying to expand, when Winston-Salem State and Savannah State joined, they were trying to make it easier and potentially split the divisions within the MEAC. But then when Winston-Salem State went back to Division II, Savannah State went back to Division II, Hampton left to go to the Big South, North Carolina A&T left to go to the Big South. At that point, from FAMU, it became a travel expense. And then on top of that, some of their big rivalries were within the SWAC. Like Southern is one of FAMU's biggest rivalries.
Yeah.
So that was within the SWAC, So from that standpoint, it kind of made sense from that standpoint. But I think, it made sense for them to make that decision to go to the SWAC, but it kind of left the MEAC down to 6 football teams and 8 total teams within that conference, with really nowhere to go to expand.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if one of those teams tries to step up again, and join them up there, from D2. But
yeah, it'll be tough. I think until they figure out the transmission committee situation, it's going to be very tough to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense from that standpoint. Because we don't know what's going to come out of that, what the requirements are going to be, because some of those schools some of the HBCUs, their athletic budgets are very, very low. Like a school like a Mississippi Valley State is in the SWAC. Their athletic budget is under $5 million, right? For all their sports.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be some of the challenges that you're going to have to deal with when it comes to some of the schools. I know there's been thoughts of that entire conference moving up to FBS, but I think the bylaws would have to change within the NCAA for that to be a feasible option. Or maybe you have something like a bunch of teams decide to do it together, like A&T jumps in. Because I know A&T has aspirations to eventually go FBS, whether it's within the CAA, because they're moving to the CAA in football next year.
Yeah.
They're in the CAA for all their other sports now. Maybe at some point they'll do something like that. Or maybe a couple of HBCUs will just go and do it. I think Jackson State is on the path once they get a couple other things going with regards to the budget, if Deion sticks around long enough to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. If Deion sticks around, that would be an attractive. Yeah,
they're so dominant in the SWAC right now, man. I've asked some of the alums and that's within those other institutions, like, hey, if Dion stays in this conference and keeps dominating you guys, what's going to give? Because that's what's been happening.
Yeah.
So something's going to have to give at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
No, I
the only
appreciate
team
it,
that,
Dave. This is really interesting. Yeah, I love it. Because I agree. I think it's really fascinating to what you said. Because I mean, that's always been sort of the hanging question: will Dion just stick around? Because he's built something. Is he doing this just because he's enjoying it? Because he can certainly, he's comfortable enough that this is, he's clearly good at it, and the entire city is, supportive of the program, and we saw, pulling in game day and how, it doesn't seem possible that the politics within the city or the state will allow that stadium to get, expanded or redone, but he's getting them talking. So if he does stick around, here I am talking about, will FAMU ever step back up? I mean, Jackson State suddenly becomes that position. Will they be the one to maybe move up and become an attractive, Conference USA target or something?
Well, I think the big thing you got to realize is this. I think the city of Jackson, it's all about economics, right? And what Deion Sanders has done to the city of Jackson has been phenomenal. And I think the governor and the politicians down there are starting to realize that if they let Deion walk out of that door, there's a lot of other things that's going to walk out of that door with him. So I think they figured out that they got to try to figure out a way to keep him here by hook or by crook. So I think they said, "Oh, we might want to try to figure out the stadium thing out after all." Before the vet crumbles, right? But we might want to try to figure this thing out. Otherwise, he is probably going to leave because he could leave. I mean, somebody eventually is going to call him. But I think he likes the fact he's going to Jackson. Just like if USF does make the call to try to bring Willie Simmons down to USF, it's going to be tough for Willie to make that move because Tallahassee is home for him. FAMU is home for him. So it's going to be hard. Like coaching at an HBCU is a different calling than being like a head football coach at a Power 5 school. It's a completely different type of perspective than coaching at a Power 5 school or coaching at a G5 school. It's a different type of tradition, a different type of legacy that you keep. Like, and I say this all the time, if Deion Sanders stays at Jackson State for like 10, 15, 20 years, that'll be bigger than his Hall of Fame career. That'll be bigger than anything he did in the NFL.
Well, I guess that's going to be one of the big questions each offseason now as we go.
Yeah, he's going to have, it's going to get asked every single year.
Yeah.
Every single year.
Dave, thanks for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, enjoyed your thoughts. Thanks. Hey, yeah, boy, what's up?
What's going on? And Mr. CFB, I have to say, I don't know if you got a new microphone, but you're sounding extra good today.
Oh. Oh, hey, you hear that, JD? Serious? We've been joking about our different mics and which mics we use. So that's always been an ongoing kind of joke among us. Hey, I got to ask you something. What's it pork roll or is it Taylor ham?
Oh, it's Taylor ham. It's Taylor ham. Oh. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. I'm sorry.
So what's a good word?
Well, Rutgers sucks, but that's whatever. I came here to issue an apology to Georgia because last time I was here a few weeks ago, I was bitching because some Georgia fans started barking at me outside of a Waffle House. I went to the game at Tennessee this weekend against Tennessee this weekend with my dad, and we had a fantastic time. So I've turned around on Georgia football, and CFP poll looks fraudulent again this week. I don't think Bama should be top 10. Neither should Clemson. Yeah, there's that. I hope Alabama loses to Ole Miss, and I do think a lot of people are overblowing how bad Alabama is this year. It seems kind of crazy that people are acting like this. Like, it is pretty bad that they lost 2 games because that doesn't really happen. But I don't know. I think a lot of people are sort of overreacting to this. They're literally at 10th. They could find a way to sneak into the playoffs somehow. Like, that is still very much in the cards at this point.
Yeah, with Alabama, you just can't.
Can't. Like this isn't over for them. Like there's still so much football to play. Tennessee can still fuck this up. I did have a question, but I kind of forgot what it was. Oh, yeah, I remember now. So with FSU not looking bad anymore, and actually kind of relates to what Dave was saying, actually. where is Deion Sanders going to go if a Power 5 school has, like, what Power 5 school would be attractive for him to go? Because FSU is looking like it's not going to be available for a little while.
I mean, I think right now it'd probably be anybody who wants to offer him at this point. So I know everybody wants to talk about, Georgia Tech or Auburn or one of these other opportunities. But I think for right now, it would have to be somebody actually willing to offer to Deion Sanders. And then we can kind of have that conversation. Because I know that, he had the quote unquote initial talks when Arkansas had their position open, when TCU had their position open. But in reality, I think there's still a lot of Power 5 schools that are still a little gun shy about Deion Sanders from his time at Prime Prep when he was in DFW. There's still a little bit of questions of how he can do academically, especially at a place like a Georgia Tech where he also has to recruit, to a level of very strong academics. But I think right now, for any team that wants to do that offer and say, we want to talk to Deion Sanders, that's probably going to be the next one that ends up being the one in the chase. I don't think there's necessarily a job that's like, Deion is waiting and hoping for this job to open up. I think he's very content right now at Jackson State. And I think whatever school eventually wants to try to move on him is going to have to do something significant to convince him to come on board. And on top of that, they're going to have to do a lot of significant negotiations with their board of regents, with their boosters, to make sure that they get everything lined up for what they'll need in order to court Deion Jackson. But for right now, I really can't see him going anywhere else other than Jackson State in this cycle. Auburn might decide to do something crazy this year, but even then, I don't think there's anything that Deion Sanders necessarily wants to leave for right now.
That's how I feel, because, I mean, like I said, FSU made the absolute most sense, but now that they're not looking bad, that it just wouldn't work out anymore for him, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. And I realize, as I'm trying to think back in my mind of all these job positions that are opening. I kept calling him Deion Jackson, like an absolute fool. So anyway, if you want to keep finding great analysis like this, Reddit CFB is the handle. Jordan Dallas as well. So, but Deion Sanders, whenever he gets offered somewhere, someone's going to have to back up a lot of opportunity for him. And I think just at least in this cycle, I don't see a job opening up that says, you know what, we'll do what is needed to get him.
Yeah, I also don't think certain schools wouldn't work. Anything that's too much of a rebuild, I don't think would even consider him, because can he actually do a full-on Power 5 rebuild?
Frankly, would he want to? That would be my other thought. I mean, that's certainly one aspect of it. Hey, what's up, Markham? I just saw you on mute.
Hey guys. Thank you for having me on, by the way. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, by the way, Reddit, your voice is crisp as hell. It's
right.
crazy.
Yeah, it sounds really good today.
You're not the only one who,
you guys are kind.
But second of all, Deion's the type of person that he does want to build a program from the ground up because he wants it to be his baby. That's how he is. He is a maniacal, and I mean that's the most respectful, positive way. He's a very maniacal, controlling person as it pertains to how he wants things done. It's almost Saban-like, and he would embrace that. I also think that as much as he loves Jackson State, which we all I'm a proud HBCU alum, and I'm rooting for him at Jackson, even though I didn't go to Jackson. Shout out to Morgan State, by the way. But he's also said, because of his coaching staff who's been with him since he was at Trinity in high school and stuff like that, back in Dallas, that he has to entertain it. And there's also been a kind of, in a lot of different back Twitter spaces and just through hearsay, that there's been folks kind of aligning themselves up in Oxford, where if there's an opportunity for Lane Kiffin to get the job at Auburn, it would be an immediate push to get Deion to Ole Miss. And they have backers lined up with, almost a $16 million collective chest for NIL money to get him there, and to have his salary almost start out at the $8 or $9 million mark with what uh, uh, Lane Kiffin's already making there currently. So it's I don't like to be political and all that stuff, but there has been a lot of politicking going on in the state of Mississippi, and Tate Reeves, amongst others within the state, the power players that be, they have not, not looked at the city of Jackson and what he's brought to that city. I mean, just within the last 3 weeks or final 2 weeks of their homestands, he brought almost $30 million of economic fees. I can't remember the name. Economic value to the city, and that's with just a FCS school. So you can only imagine, the type of regional impact, let alone state impact, he would have at a Flagstaff school like Ole Miss. And for selfish reasons, I don't want to see him leave HBCU, but there's even within the state, there's been very, very, very interesting talks. I've heard from several Twitter spaces through their own sources that this is a potential opportunity.
I'm just gonna say that if Ole Miss loses another head coach to Auburn, Oxford may burn to the ground. I can't imagine that the Ole Miss faithful are going to be very happy with seeing this repeat itself.
But the only person that you'd be okay for though is Dion, because that's
right.
Automatic success.
Well, and I think for Dion, if you've seen his, I don't want to say antics, but his self-promotion, primetime is invested in primetime, right? Like right now he's saying all the right things about trying to lure more talent, big name players to HBCUs, trying to build up HBCUs, but we haven't really seen it tested yet, whether he is significantly invested in raising up HBCUs or if he is invested in himself and this is a step to a bigger gig. And I think that the next year or two will be the real test of that.
Let me speak on it.
Oh, hey, Doc. I'd love to have you
Doc.
come in and
Go
talk.
ahead,
Let's.
Doc. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, being that I'm the one that actually graduated from Jackson State, when it comes to prime, when it comes to being when it comes to him promoting the HBCUs, I mean, he's promoting it. He's promoting it. He's promoting it his way. And in certain cases, it is schools are jumping on the opportunity to ride their wave. Now it's up to the other schools. It's up to those other coaches who are not so prideful, who are not so stubborn or stuck in their ways to jump on that wave. Because if you're not gonna jump on that wave, then literally you're gonna be left behind. You've seen. I mean, just think about this. He came in, right? And he came in. He coached the game in the spring. Coached the games in the spring. I looked at that as a tryout period. I looked at it as an evaluation period because he knew, and I knew that some of those kids that was on the team at the time, were not going to be on the team. So, did people was people upset that he overhauled the schedule? Not schedule, but he overhauled the roster like that. Yeah, it was a couple of people that was upset about it, but he was brought in there to turn around Jackson State, to turn around the woes that we had for the last 7 to 8 years. Turn it around and not say just becoming an instant success, but to become, to becoming a success. So, my whole thing about that is, hey, look, you can jump in, you can get on and jump and ride the wave, or you, like I said, you can be left behind. You can be like You could be like Connell Maynard at Alabama A&M. Real think about it.
Why are you out here?
And
Why are you out here throwing shade at Maynard for, bro?
bro, because you already know it's it's A&M week for us. Come on now.
Nah, but on a serious note, though, I completely agree with what you're saying when it comes to that aspect. But you also got to remember this too. Every HBCU doesn't have a Deion Sanders.
True.
So
Correct.
everybody's got to have a certain path. I'll never forget. They asked Sam Washington a few weeks back, has Deion Sanders impacted North Carolina A&T? And he just started laughing. He said, no, because we're going on our own path. We got our own way. You
Right.
can't be dependent on that. You got to build your program because everybody isn't going to get a Deion Sanders to be your head coach. And I think that's sometimes lost.
True. I mean, but it's true. But it's still in certain instances, especially where, of course, not with A&T because y'all playing in the Big South, and y'all we ain't never played y'all before, but I'm talking about like the ones that's in the SWAC right now.
I think the other schools in the SWAC have to leverage the opportunity of the exposure.
Yeah.
And try to work with the opportunities there. I completely agree from that aspect. But I don't think this. I agree there.
That's why I said you could. That's why I said, hey, jump on the wave and ride the wave, and do it. You know what I'm saying? You can ride the wave, but you can also do it in your, in your own way.
That kind of gets to what I was getting at with that. I mean, Jackson State, obviously, they hired Dion to come in and revitalize that program. And he's used that platform to try to bring attention to the HBCUs in general. And in doing so, I think he's turned some of the media focus to some HBCU programs that otherwise haven't been getting as much respect as they deserved. And some of these coaches definitely are able to use that and kind of, like you said, ride that wave, even if they're not crediting Dion for it. I mean, even the fact that it's getting brought up that, is Dion impacting you? That question's not going to get asked without him. And coaches are always going to try to, no, it's not it's not an effect that he's having. It's the effect that I'm having. But you'd be a fool not to jump on the publicity of that and to get as much mileage out of it.
No, I completely agree. But my argument is when you ask a question like that to somebody who's already won 4 Celebration Bowls, who already had a plan in place to move to FBS, who's already done the things that they needed to do. Like they've already kind of, before Dion showed up to Jackson State, they've already announced that they were moving to the Big South. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That type of thing.
I mean,
that's what I'm getting at.
Like, I get where you're coming from, but the way I look at it is that as a white dude who watches college football, I never thought about college football at the HBCU level. I never thought about how these schools' football programs are. But now that Deion Sanders became the coach at Jackson State, this is something that I follow as well now, because it has its own level to it almost. And so without Deion Sanders being there, I do think there's a lot of people who wouldn't really follow this aspect of college football that now are.
No, I agree there. I'm not going to disagree there. There's no question that Deion brought eyeballs.
He's made it.
He brought eyeballs that nobody else could bring. I'm not disagreeing there.
He's brought it more mainstream for sure.
Absolutely, I'm not going to disagree there.
And that's virtually almost every HBCU recognizes that fact. However, you can't just hang your laurels on that fact alone. And that's what Dave, and even to likes of like my school, we understand that. Like it's great that Deion has brought, mainstream media and the majority of college football watchers to be interested in HBCU football, probably for their first time. But it still takes an institution from within to build out their program. It's not just going to be, because then what happens if Deion is gone, right? Like that's still a possibility, and you got to do whatever you can to put your best foot forward, right? So, That's
Yeah,
you know
and that's
you
it,
know
and that's the thing I always tell folks, right? Like I always say, look, this is awesome exposure for HBCU sports as a whole because now
right.
we're getting a different level of exposure that we've never gotten, right? Like we got the Celebration Bowl, we'll occasionally be on television. That was pre-Dion, but now it's bigger, and now
Mhm.
that Jackson State's making it, and they're probably gonna go every year till Kingdom Come at this rate. That's gonna be great from a rating standpoint. Folks are gonna watch it because Dion's the coach. But the moment where Dion makes a decision, and I hope that never happens, but if that moment does occur where he makes a decision to move on and go coach somewhere else, I just want to make sure that the HBCUs, particularly in the SWAT and the other ones surrounding and Jackson State, were able to take advantage of the opportunities that they had. I don't want it to
I'm,
be back to what it was prior.
I'm gonna
Correct.
tell you
That's
just.
my point.
I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
like this. I'm gonna tell you like this, Dave. We always say, and I say this all the time. When it comes to a coach staying at a school, at one particular school for about 10, 15, 20 years, we don't have that no more. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Not saying that it can't happen, but we're in the business of right now as far as you know, as far as college football with coaches, you're in the business of results. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to, you got to have the results. If you don't got the results, within that certain amount of time that they ask for, then you're gone. So, like I said, we're not in that same era where we have a Bobby Bowden stand for like 35, 40 years,
But
Joe
but
Paterno stand for like
but
50,
Doc,
60 years.
but
Yeah,
Doc, we're not talking about FBS sports right now. We're talking about HBCU sports. So you
yeah.
can't tell me right now with a straight face if Deion Sanders sits there and keep Jackson State successful that he can't stay there forever
Or
I
even
think
because
better,
he
or even
can.
I
better,
think
come
that's
into
the
play.
question though. Is Dion right now? He's in a position that you don't see a lot of lower coaches at. Where honestly, he's got, or at least he should have, if he's been, good
Virtually
with his money.
every opening
He's
possible afforded to him.
Yeah.
well, he right now he's got the money, or at least he should have, to where he doesn't have to chase coaching gigs to make a fortune. He
Well,
can live very comfortably off of what he's already made from his playing days
But
and his
I,
endorsements, and
but
he could choose to stay at Jackson State despite getting offered big money
But
in
it's his
in
coaching
Power
the
staff
Five
key
that
the,
backs
the
him
programs.
key
he's
the
down.
not.
key
But
for
he's
But
him,
not.
will he?
but the key for him is
Let me
not
say
about
this.
him. The key
Yeah,
for him
it's
is not
about his
about
assistant
him.
coaches.
It's his
It's
coaching
about
He
his
staff
wanted
that does.
his
assistants.
he wanted his assistant coaches to be able to live and do the job that they actually love. That's the main thing about. That's the reason why Dion he has he's going to entertain those calls, though, what I'm saying, from other schools like that, because he wants his assistant that's been down with him ever since, like you said, some been down with him when he was at Prime Prep, like Kevin Mathis and Andre Hart. They've been down with him since he was at Prime Prep, and at Trinity. Like his whole coaching tree, his whole coaching, um, his assistants, it has something to deal with somebody that he dealt with when, what I'm saying, playing or broadcasting or anything like that. Like you said, offensive line coach came was brought to him by Houston Nutt.
Hmm.
Um, Jeff Weeks was brought to him. I forgot who brought him to him, but he has a good relationship with, what I'm saying, with Jeff Weeks. TC Taylor and Otis and Coach O, they Jackson State. Like TC Taylor is Jackson State royalty because he's like the leading receiver in Jackson State history, basically. Um, you got, like I said, you got Dennis Sturman because he was his defensive coordinator when he was in the NFL. Like he has some sort of connection with his assistant coaches. That's the loyalty thing is something that I think he really goes by. So that's the reason why he's worried about,
And Mike
he
Zimmer's
was
not even
saying,
getting paid.
He's not even getting paid because he's still getting paid by the Vikings.
Right. He's just for free, just off the strength.
Uh-huh. And like I said, like most of it, he just want to get them paid. He just want to make sure that they are set comfortably.
One thing that I wanted to ask from y'all is, do you think, at what point do people just stop asking, is he going to leave? Oh, he's going to leave. Because you sense that, there is that push where there's a skepticism out there that he's not going to stay for very long. What do you think? Should he have to keep addressing that? I think that's my thought. Does he have to keep always being asked, like, are you going to stay there? I mean, he stays until he leaves, or is that just not fair to not bring it up constantly?
I mean, that's
like
for the me. I mean, that's the media has to do their job. I mean, I you can't not tell the media not to do their job, right? Like, they're there to, grab interest and get likes and all, all the stuff that comes with it, and that comes along with the intrigue of, does Deion stay or does Deion go? I mean, that's kind of, interesting, like a microcosm of his NFL career, right? Like, he goes from Atlanta to San Fran, from San Fran to Dallas, from Dallas to Baltimore, right? Like, it's that, or in the baseball watch, from Atlanta to the Yankees, or the Yankees to Atlanta. I'm sorry, like that's kind of how he is. He moves in his own way, and it's very, that's part of his MO. It's very intriguing. And I think you gotta ask that question. I think for fans, it's more so like, who love HBCU football, it's kind of depressing to hear.
I mean, the way I look at it is this. Some odd years ago, I remember people in the media were saying that there was a rumor that Nick Saban could leave Alabama. I think it was for Texas A&M at the time. If Nick Saban, after winning like 4 national championships or something like that at that point, could have rumors that he would leave for Texas A&M for some reason, then like I don't think there being rumors about Deion Sanders leaving or people asking is the worst thing, because it just sort of comes with being someone with that level of like reverence in that position.
I feel like I think most people just get tired of hearing the question being asked, is he going to stay? He's going to go. The only person that knows that is him. Now, if he goes, if he does leave, AD Ashley Robinson, more than likely, or has already have a contingency plan in place just for when Deion leaves. Like, he has to be talking to somebody behind the scenes, and to where that whoever he hires is a big hire, and they kind of continue with some of the things that Deion has brought about to Jackson State. But like I said, the only person that actually knows when he's gonna leave is him. That's it.
Definitely. I just wanted to ask a slightly different question because, Markham, you mentioned Morgan
Deion is
State.
such a dominant figure, man. It's unbelievable.
Was it?
I said Deion is such a dominant figure, man. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, man.
Oh, it's great. This is how this is related. Not regardless of Deion, like, just the amount of intrigue within HBCU sport is. So my pops, he played for the great legendary Big House Gaines, and well, at that time Big House Gaines was the athletic director at Salem State, and for Coach Bill Hayes, who's a legendary coach within HBCU athletics and especially within North Carolina itself. And he's probably part of the last bastion of the black youth generation of primarily going to HBCUs before they would go to a PWI. And he was like, even back then, the fanfare and the buzz surrounding black college football isn't this is not the same as it is right now, which that's it's crazy. But my bad. Sorry for
No, not. I just want to ask you one quick question. Since you mentioned you're a Morgan State guy yourself, right? I
yeah.
had to ask, how are you thinking Coach Wilson's doing right now? Because that was a big thing when you guys got him from Bowie.
So it's crazy. Like, one, I'm pissed. Like, I'm still mad at Coach Wheatley. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, I would never like him again. Like, and I'm putting that lightly. And it made me mad because how he left was so unprofessional in my mind, collegiately speaking. And it put us behind the 8 ball because it forced us to then try to, over a 6 week set to 8 week span, try to seek out a head coach and allow for a guy with the resume and pedigree as a Coach Wilson to have to come in June, which pretty much means like, it's kind of like a dead period, and then July comes, and then it's training camp, and you're pretty much learning your team's names and trying to teach them, just run straight dive, right? As you about to play Georgia Southern. What's your name again, son? Oh yeah, halfback dive. Like that's kind of what a lot of people thought. And the fact that he's had this team that's not his players play the way that they've been playing against the type of schedule that we've had, where there were certain games where we were actually the favorites to win, even though we didn't come out on top because like right now we just, like I said, we're still a team that's trying to figure it out. But there are certain expectations of us that we haven't had in years. It's amazing. I mean, listen, we played a Towson team who's historically good, and they're middle of the pack this year, like they've been like the last couple of years. But from a respectable CAA conference, and we were winning the majority of that game, and we should have won that game. We lost them 29-21, late. But, like, we were winning the majority of that game. We beat a St. Francis team who had gone to back-to-back or won back-to-back NEC titles and had just fallen to let's say for Sacred Heart, who just lost to a St. Francis team who's now the NEC champions this year. You know, and then we came back against a bad Norfolk State team on our homecoming and lost at the game-ending play for a touchdown for them to come back and win. And then this past Saturday against Stony Brook,
it was a field goal.
A field, right? Like it's but and I always say this, right? Like good teams have to go through these type of growing pains, and the fact that it's been accelerated this fast is amazing. And I was talking to a couple of other boosters and alum, like really we should be 7-2, which that's even more astonishing in my mind that we're talking about anything relatively of that. Like our record shows that we're 3-6, and we knew like going to conference play that the likes of Central or South Carolina State we'd have a hard time against, and we displayed that against Central. Like props to Coach Trey Oliver. That's a hell of a team they got down there in Durham. But we also showed our brass, if you will, against South Carolina State. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't like oh, you got lucky. No, it was a thorough ass whooping, for lack of better words. Excuse my language. Like we were about business, and it was similar to the likes of what he's accustomed to doing down at Bowie. So once he gets his recruiting cycle, once he gets a spring in session, you have a defense where they're uberly aggressive. They play a lot of man, sometimes a lot of cover zero, right? So that means you have to be on your P's and Q's. And this is with guys that were coming in literally into camp 2 weeks before they're about to play their first game against Georgia Southern, right? Like guys literally saying, "Hey, my name is George. Hey, my name is Bob. How you doing? Oh yeah, you covering who? Okay, I got him." Right? Like that's kind of how these guys were going along with. Like it was almost like NFL style. So now that they'll have a full offseason to actually digest, break down what happened, digest, get the recruits. And by the way, I mean you're talking about locking down the DMV region. he's doing that to a T. Like, and that's one of the kind of cool things about being in Maryland. Like, there's only 3 Division I teams, and so yeah, you understand. Like, you may not get the 4 or 5 star. That kind of will fall to Maryland, and usually Maryland gets more so 3 to 4 stars and an occasional 5 stars. But okay, there's a lot to go around, right? Like, it's not like you're in a state like Virginia where it's saturated with D1 schools or North Carolina and et cetera. Like, no, like we just got to compete against Towson and Maryland. And, he's going to do, and because he was at a D2 program, a lot of times kids overlook that. But now that he's at a D1 program, it's more elevated. So I just tip my hat off to the guy. I just think the best is yet to come for our program. And I know for a fact we're going to be a formidable foe for years to come within conference play. And, from early interviews of his, he wants to play for a FCS national title. That's his ordeal. Like, because he came from the D2 ranks, and the D2 ranks, regardless of your HBCU or PWIF D2, like you play for an overall D2 national championship. So he wants to still kind of compete for that. So what does that mean for Morgan regarding conference realignment? I don't know. But I do know that he heavily is also in favor, not just in playing of the Celebration Bowl, but for a national title.
NEC.
There's also been rumblings of the Patriot League too. So those 2 conferences are definitely like something that I know the athletic department is looking at.
Y'all actually would be a fit in the CAA if they send you guys an invite, believe it or not. All jokes aside.
Yeah, we would. I think if you look at the geographic map of the CAA, it's kind of like a inverted old MEAC map. And I don't know if I don't know if our department wants to deal with that type of travel. Now, I've also heard rumblings of the CAA trying to break the conference into 2 divisions.
They are. They're definitely doing north south, but they haven't decided how they're gonna handle football, because you got to remember, right? They have a lot of football only schools in the conference, but
Right.
the rest of the schools, they are gonna split them north south for the rest of the sports. But football
Right.
is kind of different, because like Rhode Island, Maine, some of those schools are football only schools.
Right. So that's kind of where it gets a little bit tricky regarding what we think. And I know there's a lot of old heads. Like, I'm a former football player at Morgan, and it's kind of like a split between the youthful football alum and the older heads. Kind of 2 eras of when, like, the last time Morgan was really good to where the last time Morgan was kind of all right, and I was part of that all right era. Those guys, the older heads, wants to see Morgan in the CAA, but that all comes on the new AD and the president.
All I'm gonna say is this, y'all: that Morgan Towson matchup will be lit.
You said the Morgan Towson matchup?
It'll be lit.
They play that. So we've been playing that kind of outside of I think the COVID 2020 season. Since 2018, they've been playing that consistently, home and away against each other. And
2017 actually. Yeah, but yeah.
2017. Sorry, yeah, you're right. Thank you. I was kind of upset at the fact that, because I played there from 2013 to 2016, that we didn't get a chance to play them.
Oh yeah.
There was like a bit of hiatus from 2009 to 2017, so it was like kind of was crappy that we couldn't play them. And then now, ironically, when we won our championship, that was the same year that they had Terrence West and them boys make it, national title run. So like, Baltimore was just jumping that time. Yeah, it would be jumping. Like, I think there's definitely a push, because I know Rob Ambrose, the coach of Towson, like his dream, and I'm pretty sure for Wilson as well, is to try to get the game so big that it could be played at M&T.
It's plausible, man, because I know like A&T has been playing Elon for years. So now that they're in the same conference, that's going to be something serious. And there's talks,
Right?
It looks like Elon's going to make an at-large bid, and if A&T wins the Big South, and it looks like they got a pretty damn good shot to do it, they're saying that might be the matchup in the playoffs. So that's going to be a crazy first-round matchup to say the least.
Hey, Dave, y'all. I think A&T will win the Big South.
I'm worried about Gardner Webb, bro. I'm worried about Gardner Webb.
Yeah, Gardner Webb. Yeah, this is the Gardner Webb game, but I feel like y'all will be able to beat them this year. Because because y'all play Charleston Southern this weekend, right?
Yeah, but that game don't matter because the bottom line is
it don't matter. But
Gardner Webb is 3-0. Gardner Webb is 3-0. They've played a pretty tough out of conference schedule as well, and I remember what they did to us last year. So
hey,
we had 13 penalties against Norfolk State. So we have to be focused to make sure that we're ready for that game in 2 weeks. And Jalen's hurt. Kyle's hurt.
So I just wanted to really quickly.
Yeah, well, he should be fine, but we'll see what happens against Charleston Southern. It'll be interesting because we don't need to win Charleston Southern to win the Big South. We have to be Gardner Webb. That's a must win. With Campbell losing last week to Bryant, it's pretty much Gardner Webb versus A&T for the championship, final week of the season, at Gardner Webb.
Yeah. So I just wanted to see, we got Sam, you're up here. I wanted to see what you wanted to contribute. I also see you, Thak. Just wanted to be, let everyone get a chance. What's up, Sam?
Hey, how's it going, man? I just wanted to bring it back to the SEC real quick. I wanted to get your opinion, actually the SEC and the Pac-12. I wanted to get y'all's opinion. So I know a lot of people are going to write off Utah as a two-loss team, but with the schedule looking up, they have a chance to play Oregon. Let's say they win the Pac-12 championship and LSU squeaks out a win against Georgia, right? Let's say, last-second field goal maybe. And let's say Utah kind of runs the table. Doesn't look bad, kind of beats Oregon by 2 touchdowns or something like that, and maybe wins the Pac-12 against USC by a touchdown. Do you think Utah has any possible chance of making the 14 playoff?
Now, I know Sirius might have some thoughts on this too, but I personally think it would take a lot of things they would need a lot of help. There's so many teams ahead of them that could otherwise take that spot now. If they win out, and they would get some strong wins, and they'd have that victory over USC, especially if USC, gosh.
They're in an awkward spot. They're in a really awkward spot because of that out-of-conference loss, which leaves them in the running for the Pac-12 championship, but it hurts their chances overall, and the fact they've already beat USC. So the other side you have to think about it is, who do you want to face in the Pac-12 championship game to give your strength of schedule a boost and, hopefully get another ranked win? So which team do they go to do it? Because it's not like there's another undefeated there is an undefeated Pac-12 team out there to beat. And we kind of saw this happen a few years ago with Auburn when they had that loss to Clemson, and they were still able to get into the SEC championship game. Of course, they lost the rematch against Georgia. But there was some potential, really a lot of weirdness that could happen because they had the win over Alabama, they had the win over Georgia, but they also had that Clemson loss to kind of screw with things. So it's a weird situation for Utah to be in right now because, and if we're totally honest, the Florida loss doesn't look any better the longer the season goes on. LSU's loss to Florida State out of conference at the beginning of the season has the potential to have the same effect. It kind of makes it weird. If LSU wins the SEC, then obviously they're pretty much a lock to get in, but that's because they had to beat Alabama and Georgia, possibly Tennessee again. And the only loss they would have would be to Tennessee in conference play. And then the Florida State loss actually looks pretty solid as things go. But I'd say Utah just doesn't have those advantages schedule-wise because they don't have that real contender for the playoffs, and they don't have an undefeated team to beat at this point that an LSU would have. I mean, that's just kind of my gut reaction right now. I think that they'd be probably in the running with a one-loss, either Michigan or Ohio State, whichever one loses their rivalry game, and misses out on the Big Ten championship, as trying to get into probably like a 4 seed. I don't think that they could get to a 3 seed unless things went really crazy. But I can see that there's probably like 3 or 4 teams that are kind of jockeying for that last spot.
Yeah, I agree. So you believe I believe the Florida State loss to LSU is somewhat being tossed to the side, especially by the committee, seeing as, last second missed extra point. Doesn't look like you got beat by 2 touchdowns. So my question is, say they look at that as, as a push in a way, and you got the Tennessee loss for us, and you have Oregon's Georgia loss. Do you see Oregon's Georgia loss as exponentially worse or pretty much the same LSU's loss to Tennessee?
Well, I just want to give a little background. When they were talking to Boo Corrigan in that media call immediately after the rankings show, people were asking about LSU and how they were kind of looking at that. And with LSU, especially, with Oregon, that was the question, like, is Oregon ahead just because they only have one loss? And, they're looking as much as the information they have in front of them. And in their mind, LSU's win over the last couple of weeks with Alabama and Mississippi, they tend to have a little bit of recentism there. So they were kind of impressed by those wins over at the time, number 7 Ole Miss, at the time over number 6 Alabama. And then they're kind of looking, it seems to be that they're looking at teams gain momentum over time. And to an extent, of course, that's going in Oregon's favor as well, especially since that loss to Georgia. So, it's a little harder to compare those two against each other right now, because I would say, gosh, I would want to give Oregon the edge if they won out for a lot of reasons there. But in terms of Utah against LSU, I think that Florida, as Sirius was saying, that Florida State loss is not looking as bad, while the Florida loss for Utah is looking worse each time, especially now that, and again, a lot of things could change, but if Florida State continues to win, and they certainly seem to be gaining some momentum, and it's certainly the pounding they gave Miami got a lot of attention, I think it'll help them in the long run. But yeah, I think for LSU, if they win the SEC, I think they're going to be in no matter what. That's just the strength of that entire conference is going to help them. For Utah, it would need a little bit of help. And it's funny, too. I keep thinking that they're going to have to beat Oregon, so that would be strong. And then they'd probably have to, I don't know, would they have to play Oregon again? I'm not even sure how that would work out.
Yeah, I agree. I was curious about the same thing. I thought, because I see the obviously the recency bias, and they did mention as the season goes on, you see teams' improvement. That's a lot to play in, especially for Oregon and for LSU, because, Oregon come off the big loss to Georgia, but they've improved a lot. Same thing with LSU. But see, the only thing about LSU is, as an LSU fan, I saw we slipped up against Florida. I think that was more of a coming out of the gate, loss. Technically just a mishap, but then the loss to Tennessee just looks almost just as bad as the loss to Georgia did for them, except for, we did score a few more points, but I think Georgia obviously looks exponentially better than Tennessee. So it's really a tough question. I was just looking for, I guess, like a chaos scenario, because everyone's looking, who are you going to put in between TCU, Oregon, and LSU, right, if all 4 went out. I was trying to see what happens if, like I said, Utah maybe making shake things up.
So in that situation, you're thinking like Georgia wins out. Well, are you saying Georgia wins out or LSU wins out?
LSU wins out. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because they're going to you're not going to leave Georgia out, I know it's not going to happen, but even with like a dominating performance by LSU over Georgia, I just don't see a possibility of leaving Georgia out.
I think that there is a possibility if LSU comes into that SEC championship game and just destroys Georgia, which is going to be a very tough thing to do. That they're a very balanced team, and we saw that in the Tennessee game, and I don't know if they're leaps and bounds ahead of Tennessee, but they're good enough that they could play ball control against one of the most explosive offenses in the country. which in my mind says an awful lot about them. So if LSU comes out and they destroy Georgia, and I'm talking like 20, 30-point win, then I think that definitely raises the question of, does Tennessee have a chance to get back in the running? Because they're not going to take all three of them. So you've got a one-loss Tennessee, a one-loss Georgia, and then LSU's a lock at that point. If LSU wins the SEC championship, they are a lock for the playoff. Just, that's it. Conversation over.
I agree.
But
the only team that I really had worried about pushing us out in any possible way is Georgia. I know TCU's resume isn't terrible, but I am an advocate for. I've never been one of those that said, especially up until recent years, especially because of the overall scope of college football over the nation. All the teams are getting better. A lot of the teams are getting better. I know Florida and teams like that are falling off, but you go look and you have these teams like TCU that are coming up and maintaining this progress. And I was the kid at the beginning of the season that I thought Baylor was going to do better. Well, we won't really bring that up, but I was looking at I was looking at that as far as, like I said, everyone's getting better. So you look at TCU, but I still do believe that if, like, say, TCU switch spots with Missouri, do they have 4 losses?
I don't think so. I don't think that with Missouri's schedule, I don't think TCU has 4 losses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A&M schedule. See, I'm thinking Missouri schedule because you're gonna lose. You would assume TCU loses to Tennessee and Georgia, right?
Maybe.
Well, we don't
Maybe.
assume
Max
things
Duggan's
Missouri here.
Max Duggan's play. Missouri's always gets to be a little bit of a punching bag in these situations. We're just following in the NCAA's footsteps here.
I was about to say, are we penalizing them?
Yeah. But I think, kind of getting back to the heart of your question, I think that if TCU's undefeated, they're in, hands down. If Georgia's undefeated, they're in. LSU is obviously out at that point. LSU's only shot to make it is if they win out and make it to Atlanta and then beat Georgia. That's their only way in. Unless, like, really weird stuff gets happening and we've got, like, a 2-loss Big Ten champion or something stupid, to where suddenly a 3-loss team is on the table. But back to the part about Oregon, I would say that Oregon's loss to Georgia looks, I won't say better, but less relevant the farther we get from it. Both because Georgia has dominated a lot of other teams along the way, and also because of the evolution we've seen of Bo Nix. And, he's focused, he's having fun. He's looking a lot. He's looking a lot better. I had to.
Yeah, you have.
He does look like he's having fun.
But he's playing a lot better as the season has gone on. And I would say, if you weren't seeing that kind of progression, then I think that voters would be more hesitant. But I think that makes the Georgia loss less embarrassing for the schedule, especially if they win more games. So I think, a 1-loss Oregon Pac-12 championship champion, they've got a good shot to be in the running, depending on how everything else shakes out. Obviously, Alabama picking up another loss helps. The potential for LSU to make it to the SEC championship, where I would assume Georgia would be relatively heavily favored, that helps, because it kind of keeps away that monster scenario of 1-loss Bama, 1-loss Georgia, 1-loss Tennessee, which, like, everyone outside of the SEC was just cringing at the thought of, and what impact that could have on the CFP selections. So that's kind of where I'm at with the situation right now. We still got a lot of football left to play, and we all know that things can get really weird in November.
So you see no scenario for a 3 SEC team playoff?
Oh my God, that would be such a... I'm never going to say it's impossible. I'm never going to say it's impossible.
Just for this year. I don't believe it'll be possible for other years, but for this year, do you see a possibility for a 3 SEC team playoff?
Not unless there are some other teams. I mean, like, TCU picks up at least 1 loss. The winner of the Big Ten picks up, like, 2 losses. there's got to be some serious attrition between now and then, and the Pac-12 completely cannibalizes itself to
But
where we're
that's the
talking
okay,
about.
of
think the
all of
game
those
that
options, the Pac-12 completely cannibalizing itself is the most plausible. It always is. Because I mean,
I
absolutely
you
always
know,
forgot to mention
Oregon
it.
State, people don't believe it, but Oregon State actually has a chance to mess around and beat Oregon.
oh,
It doesn't look
absolutely.
like it.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
But people are writing it off.
Yeah, Oregon's next 3 games are Washington, and that's going to be a rivalry game. And Washington
That's
seems
going
to
to be a
be
tough game.
decent. You got Utah, and then you got at Oregon State. Like those are not 3 easy games. Of the final stretch of the teams we've been talking about, I think Oregon
LSU
probably
has
has
the
the
clearest
hardest.
path, and LSU probably has the clearest path. Yeah, I don't think.
I
I know Arkansas and A&M are going to be rivalry games, and I will ask if I'm still around. I'll ask a question about A&M in a second, but I don't think. I know that A&M will play motivated just because they want to beat us. I think the play against who they play close recently. I'm drawing a blank here. They played a game that they're pretty really close game that they almost won that they shouldn't have been in anyways. Oh, I'm drawing a blank. They played.
but yeah, so
Was it Bama? They played a little bit better against Bama than everyone expected, right?
Oh yeah, we're talking about A&M. Yeah, Bama. That was a really
Yeah.
close game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but
which
the
maybe says
question
more
is,
about Bama than it does A&M,
that's
to be
what I was going to
honest.
say. Does it say more about Bama or A&M? Because Bama obviously isn't the dragon everyone expected to slay this year, but obviously it still feels good to beat them. But
You take what you can get, right? Like,
oh, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I didn't get a chance to make this game. I was at the 2019 game in Tuscaloosa, and that can never be beat in my opinion. But beating them in Tuscaloosa, I mean, hearing 106,000 people go silent when Joe Burrow converted that third down, you just can't beat that. I know everyone loves hearing don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have been in Death Valley Saturday night and hear, all those people go crazy for the touchdown, the 2-point conversion, but I'm one of the very few people who loves hearing the enemy shut up. I love being behind enemy lines and quieting them. So to me, that can't be beat. But where I was going to go with this was if LSU beats Arkansas decidedly and A&M decidedly, and say Oregon has a close game with Utah and loses to USC, does the win against Bama look better for us, or does their win against Utah look better for them, seeing as they're both 2 lost teams at the moment?
doesn't matter. LSU wins the SEC championship, they're in. As LSU loses the SEC championship, they're out. That's essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree too. Trust me. The resume, it will speak for itself. I just think the only thing that I hesitate on is I think Alabama is going to demolish Ole Miss this weekend. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't think that Alabama is as good as recent years, obviously, but we all know what happens when you come off of an Alabama loss.
Just ask Mississippi State. Mississippi State has been disproportionately been the team that plays Alabama after they lose.
And what's funny,
they scored a touchdown in Tuscaloosa this time, so
I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns.
This is what's funny is I'm an LSU fan all my life, 30 years old, and I live in Starkville, Mississippi. I can actually see the stadium from my apartment right now, and they.
Hey, I had friends that went to state. I had friends that went to state, and they complained an awful lot about all the Alabama fans nearby because it was so close to Tuscaloosa that they just decided to root for the better team. So,
well, I will say, living in Starkville for so many years, that I can say that Mississippi State fans are definitely always going to remain. We'll be better next year, and it never ends up being that way.
Hey, so I want to let in Thack and then Castro because I know you guys have been up here for a while. Thack, what's up, man?
Yeah. You know them Missouri Tigers now. They just gave that dumbass. Nah, man. I argue with some dumbass on the message boards earlier on Saturday when they said that extended that contract for him. If anybody don't know, they extended his contract 2 years. A Drinkwitz there. And I argued with this idiot on the message boards. He's like, man, recruiting doesn't matter. This team sucks. I don't know, man. This I told this dumbass he was an idiot because he's like, I told him, I was like, man, even be competitive in the SEC, you got to have, top 25 recruiting classes. And Missouri hadn't had, real good recruiting since prime Gary Pinkel now. And, that's nothing. I was listening to Feinbaum's show today. Some dumbass called in. I think it was the idiot I was arguing with on the message board from Missouri. And he said, his dumbass said he was pissed about it. Feinbaum's like, it's a recruiting thing. He's getting assurance, for the next round of guys, as long as that buyout doesn't change. That's the big thing. If the buyout don't change, then we're all good. If the buyout changes by a little bit, that's fine. But you got to be even be remotely competitive in the SEC. You got to have top 25 recruiting class, and that's what Gary Pinkel did. And that's when 2014, that's when Missouri football was playing definitely at its best in a long time, and by far its best in the SEC is when Gary Pinkel was recruiting solid, consistent classes. I mean, you can't remember they had that Sports Illustrated page, right? And on the front cover it was Chase Daniel, I think, and Marty Malk. And they said this is the best quarterback in the nation, as his backup might be even better. And it didn't turn out that way, but that's when we were best, man. And serious left, man. I was gonna congratulate him on a good game in the SEC dumpster fire bowl.
I'll let him know for sure.
I think that we should have a trophy that's like a 8-ton rolling dumpster that gets rolled out onto the field. Whoever wins gets to jump in it and like play around and trash or something. But damn, that was probably most athletic. I didn't get to talk to him last time I came on here because he wasn't up here. But man, that was the most athletic play I've seen from a Vanderbilt player in a very long time, where he hurdled our low line, tackled that dumbass Brady Cook for a scoop and score.
I'll let him know that for sure.
Well, to your point, I do believe recruiting plays a major role, but I'm one of the few that believes coaching plays much of a better role. As just ask A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what that dumbass said on the message boards. Look where A&M's at. That's the thing. That's A&M's a culture problem, man. A&M's a total
culture
Jimbo
problem.
Fisher,
Yeah, okay, that makes
culture
sense.
problem. And
Absolutely.
And Drinkwitz, here's the thing. He's got the culture. He's got the culture under control for the most part. I think if he picks up an offensive coordinator, that's what I need. We need Jimbo to get fired. We need to pick up Jimbo as an offensive coordinator. And now think about that. It would be like when the Rams.
So how many games in does it take Jimbo to lose 2 next year to be fired then?
I don't know, man. I don't give a rat's ass if Jimbo gets fired or not, but it would be nice to pick him up as an offensive coordinator. Think about it. It'd be like the 2001 Rams, man. It'd be like.
You think he would take a job after taking an $85 million buyout? That'd be like Ed Orgeron taking a
I feel
job
like he'd be an analyst.
I feel like if I'm anybody, I'm Ed Orgeron on the beach with the honeys if I make that money.
Yeah. He ain't gonna pick up another job now. But it'd be funny, think about the 2001 Rams. You had Dick Vermeil, the super nice guy, that's Drinkwitz. And think about Mike Merritt's egotistical maniac at offensive coordinator. And they got a grocery stocker to win a Super Bowl. And right now, Brady Cook, our quarterback, is better off at Hy-Vee stocking groceries, man.
Well, thanks, Zach. It was great hearing from you. Castro, what's up?
Yeah, free Harvey.
Living the dream, man. Oh, sorry, Zach. Zach or Zach?
It's Zach. Free Harvey update. Thanks, guys.
No problem,
man. Great. What's up, Castro?
Living the dream, man. How about you?
Good. What's up?
So there's like 2 or 3 things I honestly wanted to talk about, and thanks for having me on this discussion board. The first thing is, I know the biggest game of this weekend is TCU versus Texas, and I'm a huge Longhorn fan. So every week this whole season, I've had many heart attacks because of my Longhorns blowing second half leads, especially from the previous season. However, I feel like there may be an upset in Austin this weekend, considering that TCU has been in so many close games. So it's inevitable that they may get upset this weekend. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, my favorite comment that came out of just sort of the reactions to the latest CFP was it would just be perfect for TCU to be number 4 and then immediately lose to Texas. I mean, not because people necessarily want to see them lose, but just
Yeah.
because it would just sort of be a fitting moment. And which of course would be wonderful for Texas, because I mean Texas, it's that team. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. And I kind of wish JD he had to drop out at the hour mark, but he's our Texas expert. And by the way, we're gonna have, although he's been hit by a bit of a stomach bug and he's let us know, but we're supposed to have Sam Kahn from the Athletic on tomorrow night, but we may be postponing it, so we'll let that know, because since he's the athletics expert, as he likes to call himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Texas, gosh, I think that Oklahoma State game was a bit of a disappointment, obviously. I mean, that was.
Tell me about it.
But they've been strong, I mean, ever since that Alabama game. And again, Texas Tech, it's easy to look past that one a little bit, because that's just, that reminded so many people of the past when because we all remember, the Crabtree game and all that stuff, but that you still can't look past that strong game with Alabama. And again, of course, now we're like, well, Alabama might be a little weaker.
Imagine if Texas beats Alabama and we're looking at a 3-loss Alabama team in week 8, week 9. I mean,
for sure. Yeah, dude.
The entire nation would be in shambles.
Yeah.
I don't know, shambles. There would be more like the Ewoks celebrating after they blow up the Death Star at the end of Return of the Jedi.
But you'd have all those people in California who are Alabama fans that wouldn't know what to do. They'd be
my gosh. Well, they'd have to focus on Duke basketball.
Or Yankee baseball.
Exactly. Well, Lakers. I mean, I don't even have to, well, of course it's the Lakers, but yeah.
It's just the thing that's so confusing about Texas, like, we do good in the first half, and then I feel like the offense doesn't know what play to run in the second half, and I feel like that's
Sark's fault.
Yeah, and exactly. Like, I just don't know, like, what's the problem with that? I feel like they don't know how to readjust for the second half. But
I think it's more of a motivation thing. I don't even think it's a scheme thing. I think they lost that game to Alabama because Ewers got hurt, obviously. I think if he stays in the game, they win. I don't think they win by 2 touchdowns or anything. I think you win by maybe a touchdown, maybe 10, maybe even 10. But I think after you lose that game, you got to think that's those kids have been playing in Texas their whole life. A lot of them have never lost a game probably, and they come out, they lose the first game of the season, and it's just you got to get them kids back on track. And clearly, Sark just didn't seem to do a very good job of it.
But like, especially with games that I feel like they're favored to win or supposed to win, like Oklahoma State or even Texas Tech, I feel like they didn't know how to readjust in the second half, and it showed. I mean, look at the scoreboard. I mean, this past weekend, Texas only scored 3 points in the second half. And I know, like, there were fumbles from Xavier Worthy and Roshan Johnson. But, like, however, 3 points total in the second half this past weekend. That's, like, bonkers, in my opinion. So.
Well, it's funny. You got me thinking, of those times, because I'm a USC fan. At least that's what I've been. That's where I did my undergrad, and it's kind of. I get what you're saying. I mean, a lot of USC fans and to a lesser extent Washington fans who remember were a little surprised that they pulled up Sark as their head coach, only because it's Texas it's Texas. They do get some pretty good opportunities to get their pick on head coaches. So the adjustments are kind of weird in how in the second half, to an extent, it's probably as much the defense is adjusting to that offense. And Sark's an offensive coach, as everyone knows. That's his background. But, I mean,
I could understand. I could understand your argument there. I would think, though, that Tennessee's defense had to adjust a little bit more than Texas's did this year, if that makes sense. I mean, Tennessee's reminded me of in LSU's defense in 2019. And I don't want to compare the teams at all, but as far as the way that they scored and the way that they come out, it was more or less one of those things where a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on LSU's defense that year, but they were on the field every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes you're on the field. It's tough to stay competitive, stay fresh and stuff like that. I think Tennessee drew a lot of that this year, but I can't really put that on Texas because Now, their team was on the field a lot because of a lot of 3-and-outs.
Hey, Castro, man, you need to find out if your athletic director still got Tom Herman's phone number in his Rolodex, man.
Right, at least with Tom Herman, we were winning pretty much consistently. I mean, but
Been calling into this show, talking about how much better Tom Herman was since the start of the season, man.
yeah, for sure. I feel like he was just getting to know like the players really well, like in the 2020 season, and then whenever he suddenly got fired, and then I think Chris Ash was the defensive coordinator. He was starting to draw up pretty good defensive schemes, and he ended up joining Urban Meyer for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like that put a huge blow on the defense and them trying to learn even new schemes whenever Pete Kukowski came on as a DC. But, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what's been going on with the defense as far as I know. So,
man, Tom Herman. You think about Tom Herman, man. He was 5-0 in bowl games. They fired him. That's how fucked up. That's how fucked up Texas football is.
Yeah,
I guess, man.
But the second thing I wanted to talk about, I know whenever I got on this discussion board, I heard someone say like a strong possibility of 3 SEC teams in the college football playoff.
Oh, it wasn't strong. We were mostly just talking purely theoretical. Was it even possible?
Yeah, and it got me thinking because I think a couple days ago I replied to someone saying, I feel like after the dust settles, it could be Georgia, Michigan, Tennessee, and LSU as the top 4, because what if LSU tends to win out and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game? What if Michigan beats Ohio State? Wait, what's up?
I would think Georgia or LSU would have to beat Georgia decidedly.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It couldn't be like a last-second 2-point conversion or anything.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big, I think, stretch at this point. I think with all the football left to be played, I mean, we can certainly, is it possible? Yes, but I think we'll worry about taking that. It's a fun kind of like, sports theory sort of to kind of discuss, but odds are I'm not sure that, we'll worry about that when we get to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to slowly start wrapping this up. We've been going on for about an hour and 45, which is
for sure. My bad.
No, hey, you're bad. Don't worry about it. We love hearing from everybody. My 2 co-hosts kind of had to bail eventually. They're like, I got to go. I got work.
Mind if I ask one more question?
Absolutely, Sam. What's up?
All right. Excluding Alabama, biggest disappointment of the year?
Ooh, boy. Gosh.
A&M.
A&M is hard to beat only because of all the hype that the recruiting class, that famous clash between Saban, all of that stuff. I remember when we had a show that was actually specifically about the clash between them over the accusations of recruiting improprieties and things like that. So I'd say they're the biggest. I mean, does anyone have another thought on who could be the biggest disappointment this season?
No, hit it right on the head, in my opinion. No, I was going to lead into the question, like I said earlier, how many games in before Jimbo's fired next year?
I kind of reiterate what JD has mentioned before on an earlier show, and he sat down, and I thought he was joking, but he actually sat down and looked up the price of oil, and he said, if oil crosses this price, and I forgot what dollar amount it was, I could see Texas A&M pulling that trigger. So I think maybe we're looking also at the economy of oil before anyone decides to pull the trigger on old Jimbo.
World we live in, right?
Yeah. And I think it was also because it was when we were talking mostly about Auburn too, because Auburn's head coach, whoever takes that job, is probably going to demand an equally, or at least as close to a Jimbo-esque insane buyout. Don't forget, they know how insane that Auburn job is. You're dealing with incredible pressure, and they're going to, Harsin had to deal with that wild attempt to do a coup over the summertime probably over the offseason, early part of the offseason, with the boosters throwing out some wild rumors about him. So whoever goes in there, you're going to be dealing with some craziness. So I wouldn't blame anybody for trying to go for as close to a Jimbo-esque kind of buyout if you take that Auburn job.
Let us not forget, though, John Cohen did hire Mike Leach and Joe Moorhead.
Yeah,
let us not forget.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And that was one of the jokes. Can you imagine Leach? Leach is gonna be interesting too, because I mean, I'm always, I forgot who's he got next week.
Think about Leach. Think about Leach in this situation. You're in the same position as Jimbo, obviously not with as much pressure and as much, notoriety, but you're basically in the same year. These are your kids, and you're still not winning. And Jimbo's the one getting all the hate.
Leach just got his fat little girlfriend, man. He's gonna be all right.
Oh, I love he went back to that. Oh my gosh. That was like a throwback Leach quote right there. Mississippi State, I couldn't imagine them being disappointed though at this point with Leach. He's wild. Like he will out of nowhere pull a crazy upset. I'm not saying he's going to beat Georgia or anything.
Listen, I lived in Starkville. I've worked here for 10 years. And if they beat Ole Miss, all is forgiven.
And that makes it a great job for any head coach.
Trust, if they beat Ole Miss, all is forgiven.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Well, all right. I'm going to go ahead and take this as an opportunity to sort of wrap us up. This was our CFB Talk 108. We had a really long conversation about a lot of topics. We enjoyed hearing from all of you. I mean, and thanks for staying up here, Markham and John, Thak, Sam, and all the rest of you who were up here earlier. We enjoyed hearing from you. We enjoyed covering topics from, the MEAC and SWAC to the SEC and Pac-12. We always appreciate hearing from you on Tuesday nights, and we bring up guests on a fairly regular basis. We'll announce them as soon as we're on. As I said, we were hoping to have Sam Khan tomorrow night, although he's having a little bit of an illness. There's this flu going around. He got it from his kid. I know my own kid got it. I'm just hoping I don't get it from him. So we'll see when we get that up there, but we'll announce it as soon as we do. So on behalf of myself, Bob Akhieri, on behalf of my co-hosts who had to drop off a little earlier, JD Moore and Sirius, thank you all for joining us. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.
Thanks so much for having us on, man. It was a pleasure.
Go Tigers.
Thanks, guys.
Go Tigers.